This is a little bit of an impromptu live stream. Testing out some new software. So we'll see if this works. If you guys have any questions, let's answer them while I'm testing out the software. I've got Bike Insights set up. So yeah, what should we talk about? So hopefully you guys have been enjoying all the live content. I know it's not as much fun as actually writing, but it's a way for us to kind of keep making the internet while under quarantine for all basic purposes. So if there are people in the chat room, let me know where you're coming in from. Okay, cool, sweet. So we've got T-Track. Let's put it up there. Nice. So I'm using this streaming software called Ecamm Live. I've been experimenting with a bunch of different ones, everything from Zoom to YouTube to Yardstream. And this is one I've been curious about. It's a little bit spendy. I think it's like $25 a month, but it's super clean. It lets me do things like this. I can put your comments up. I can share a screen. So people in the room. Yeah, so TB, any chance Rodriguez will provide you another bike to test? We've been talking like bike build. That kind of fell off the radar with everything that's going on, but I might revisit that when, I don't know, in a couple weeks. So we've got Sparky Josh here from Central California. Where in Central California? San Luis Obispo, one of our favorite places of all time. We were actually scheduled to go out there this spring, but with COVID and everything, we had to kind of plug on that. Sweet. We got southeastern Wisconsin. Alex from Hollywood. Nice. SLC in the house. So let's experiment, guys. One of the services I provide on the channel is this thing I like to call bike whispering, helping people find their ideal bikes. And I do a lot of that by using a website called Bike Insights, so I can dial into the geometry and help describe it for you. So if you are curious about a bike, let me know in the comments, and I will bring it up on Bike Insights, and we'll nerd out about it. Yeah, interesting thing about Bike Insights, got to meet the folks at Philly Bike Expo, and I'm actually going to have them on a live stream in a couple days, and we're going to talk about why they developed the software, and how to use it to find the perfect bike for you. So sweet. We got New Jersey in the house. Alan from Minneapolis. Oh, finished Lapland. Cool. Wow. International audience today, which is pretty rad. Yes, TB, you need to do BikeWhisperer. Again, it's super chill. One of my value propositions for the BikeWhisperer program is that I'm not getting paid by brands to promote their bikes, so it's honestly like as objective a recommendation as I can make from bikes that I've ridden personally, and just my general kind of knowledge of bike geometry. So, not to knock on bike shops, but unlike a bike shop, which they have to sell their stock, I'm kind of not limited to any particular brand, and we can talk about anything. So, yeah. All right. Sean Gould, nice to see you again. Twin Cities. So let's talk bikes, guys. Someone give me a bike, and we'll take a look at it on Bike Insights and see how this whole screen sharing works. So Cole Mum asks, how do you feel about 80s, 90s touring bikes? Do they make good, gravel bikes? Yes. I used to own Trek 520, one of their long-standing lines. They do make good gravel bikes. They've got the tire clearance. They've got all the mounts if you want to carry stuff. I will say the way a touring bike generally differs from a modern gravel bike, so to speak, is the geometry tends to be a little bit more playful. They're not as overly built. Touring bikes designed to not flex under load, so the tubing tends to be a lot thicker, because that's what they were designed to do. Whereas the modern gravel bike, it's designed to do events and doesn't have a ton of load in mind. So a little bit more playful overall, a little bit more of an all-rounder kind of bike. So that's where I would say, yes, you can ride a touring bike on gravel, but is it different? I think it's different. Sweet. So we've got Brazil in the house, Spokane, Colorado. So many people. Nice. New Zealand, Dublin. Hey Russ, down in Stillwater. Think you'll ever make it down for a Mid-South ride? Yes, that's actually one of the few gravel events that we would be interested in doing. I think, although it is long, it's it's a more manageable distance than 200 miles. We didn't really plan for it this year just because we didn't have the fitness, and it's hard in the winter. But I think next year we'll try to put it on the calendar. Lots of our friends are going. Folks from Swift and Matt from Crest Bikes, all good folks. It's always good to hang out with them. So hopefully we'll make it out to Mid-South next year. Okay, so connection is a bit choppy for me. Anyone else? Let me know if it's sounding good, if it's looking good. Always hard to tell, like doing the live stream. Like I get a visual representation of what I think might be going on, but I don't really know what you guys are seeing. So let me know how the sound is. So Space Horse versus Crosscheck. That's a interesting comparison. On the surface, kind of similar. Both drop bars, both bigger clearances. I personally own the Space Horse, the version 1 with the cantilever brakes, and it's almost a touring bike. It's not quite as beefy a tubing as like a long haul trucker, but certainly got the length in the back. It does make a really great kind of stable gravel bike. Not the most liveliest bike I've ever ridden, but pretty fun. I think that's where the Crosscheck is a little bit different. Crosscheck, a little bit shorter, a little steeper head tube angle, more playful overall. So if you're looking for kind of a more chill bike, I think the Space Horse is a good option. If you want something that's a little bit livelier, then the Crosscheck is one to check out. So let's see. Any other questions? What about BWR? I'm not quite sure what BWR is. Let me know. Connection looks good. Sounds good. Thanks. All right. Chattanooga, Tennessee in the house. Cool. So TBS, Midnight Special, Finney Ridge, or Bombora? All right. There's a lot to unpack there. So going down the line, Midnight Special definitely feels like a road bike with fat tires. So a little bit, short rear end, a little bit more livelier front end. The Finney Ridge would be similar-ish. I think the Finney Ridge I tested had a little bit longer rear end at a 430 instead of the shorter, I think 425, 420 on the Midnight Special. So it wasn't as jumpy, but it did have a similar front end. The trail number was 60, which I think is pretty similar to Midnight Special. So those are how those compare. In terms of the Bombora, I would say has the rear end of kind of like a Midnight Special, but a fairly slack front end. So it accelerates well, climbs well while standing, but descends a lot more stable. It's slightly imbalanced, but in a good way, I think, for off-road riding. So Scott White, any experience with Norco bikes? I got to ride one of their steel adventure bikes. I forget the exact model. And I came away thinking that was a pretty fun bike, reminiscent of the Warbird if the Warbird were in steel. What was nice about the Norco I did test ride is it used like Columbus 725, so a little bit more interesting than what you would get in like the stock Surly steel. Maybe a little bit lighter, a little bit more livelier. Nothing super exotic, but definitely upgrade from, let's say, stock production steel. All right. Matt Duncan, ever test ride the Black Mountain Cycles Monster Cross or a new version? So Black Mountain Cycles, I've been well aware of the brand, and I've been wanting to get either their Monster Cross road bike or their Road Plus bike or their Monster Cross bike into review. Hasn't happened yet. They're a fairly small brand, so like many small brands, they have very few bikes to send out. And the bikes that they are going to send out are probably going to go to bigger websites and magazines before me. So Would love to try Black Mountain Cycles, but haven't had the opportunity. Sweet. We got someone from the Philippines, born there. Fun fact. Have I ever tried the low carbon sus forks? I have not. And generally, I'm not a fan of suspension forks on gravel bikes just because I think it adds a lot of complexity and weight. But I like to keep an open mind. So if I had a chance to test ride one, I would definitely take that opportunity. Okay, saddle upgrade versus tires. That's kind of a tough one because I would say probably saddle first. Hopefully you can get a saddle dialed and then upgrade the tires. Both very important. I'd say of equal importance because, changing the tires will have the biggest impact on how a bike feels. But that makes no difference if you can't sit on the bike for any more than like half an hour. So saddle first, then tires. All right. Yeah, I'm glad you guys have been digging ACN. We've got another one planned for this Thursday, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, so 5 Pacific and 8 Eastern. And the topic for this week's ACN is 3 big bike industry mistakes. We don't quite know what those are yet. We still have to discuss about half an hour before, but that is the title and thumbnail for this week's ACN. Let's see. Riv Clem Smith Jr. for gravel. It's a good question. Rivendell, been a fan of their bikes for over a decade. Only recently got a chance to ride a Riv last year, and I think it was one of the Clems, and it was set up with the Bosco bars, so actually it was a Clementine, so different. And didn't have enough time to make a decision either way, but I think it would be interesting to ride on gravel. T-Track, when is the Sage Tie review coming? Probably not for another month. The weather here has been really marginal, so we've had some warm days, and then it gets really sloppy with the rain, and then occasional snow. So a lot of the interesting gravel rides are still pretty mucky. So waiting for those to clear up. Paul Clark, yes, I too was interested in Rodeo Labs, but no, they do not do review bikes. They're very adamant about that, which is fine, Would I ride a carbon frame on a multi-day gravel event? Yeah, I mean, I think, the interesting thing about carbon gravel bikes is since they have such large tire clearance, you can really soften up the ride with the right tire choice. Because it used to be, if you had a carbon road bike and your max tire width was only 30, it could only get so soft. But now with the new gravel bikes and the monster cross bikes, the bigger, more supple tire hides a lot of kind of material differences between bikes, I think. Let's see. Any other questions? So I get this one a lot. Do you think old 80s, 90s mountain bikes can make good all-round touring bikes? Yes. I know lots of people that have converted old Stumpies into mixed terrain bikes or gravel bikes or touring bikes. The reason I've personally not done it is because it's really tricky with sizing. You have to kind of compensate for the fact that it was designed around flat bars if you're going to put drop bars on it. You have to make up that difference in the top tube. And I've not done enough investigation in it to figure out what would be the appropriate size for me. Let's see. So Camille Adam from Poland, are we going to test the GRX group set? Funny you ask. I've got 2 bikes in for review, the Sage Titanium Storm King and the Otso Wahila in carbon. And both of them have GRX 1x group sets. Both of them set up slightly differently. The Sage has the GRX shifter, XT rear derailleur with a tan pan and the cassette on it is 11 to 46. So kind of a hybrid road mountain with the tan pan in the middle to help them communicate. And the Otso has the GRX shifter, GRX rear derailleur, and they just shoved it into make it fit with the 11 to 46 with no tan pan. So it actually clears it. I was going to make a video later this week showing the two drivetrains. It's not as elegant as the XT just because the derailleur seems a little stressed, but it does shift and it does work, surprisingly. So let's see, any other questions? All right, I see Kai Venture Bags in the house. Jason Miller, fan of the GRX group set. I am too. I love the levers. I love the range and the rear derailleur. I do wish that would trickle down into a mechanical brake group set for those that want to use cable actuated brakes, but we shall see. Your thoughts on suspension for gravel bikes? Not a fan, personally. Yes, we do need some art for ACN. We were going to do a logo reveal this Thursday. We've had maybe a half dozen people submit potential logo designs. There's still time. You can email to alternativecyclingnetwork@gmail.com. I know, not very creative, but easy to remember. So if you're a designer and you want to help us out with coming up with a logo for ACN, please send it there. We've got some really good ones. One is like very metal inspired, which is super fun. But you will see. Okay, Melissa Nash, Cutthroat versus Jones bike. Two very different bikes. Jones bike is about maybe 8 pounds heavier and much bigger tires and different handlebars. I'd say they can cover, similar-ish terrain. I like to think of the Cutthroat as more of a super monster cross gravel bike, and the Jones bike as its own special thing. Let's see. Okay. Jones bar on Pine Mountain or Fargo Cutthroat? I think the Jones bar would probably make more sense on something like the Marin Pine Mountain. The Fargo Cutthroat, it could work. You'd have to kind of compensate for how much the bars bring you back. So let's see. Mozzie Rando versus Polyvalent if spec'd with identical components and gearing. That's a good question. I feel like the Mozzie was both are low trail. Like the Polyvalent has a trail number in the 40s, and I think the Mozzie was a Jan Heine approved low trail bike, so might have been upper 30s, mid 30s. I don't know. That's hard to say. I would probably, for me, I would lean towards the Polyvalent. I like its selection of mounts a little bit better. I think especially the newer version that's going to come out soon, which is a little bit more modernized, so with through axles and threadless headset, that'll make it a super viable option. Okay, let's see. So this is an interesting question, comes a lot. Is 650B dead now that frames can go 700 by 45 plus? No. So here's why. I think if you're a shorter rider, if you ride bikes with frames that are less than 54 centimeters, there is still huge advantages to having 650B. Even though you can get equivalent widths in tires, you can get you just don't get toe overlap without having to slack out the front end of the bike. So as a short rider, still big advantages. Even across the board, if you think about it, 650B, let's say you had a 650B by 50 versus a 700 by 50. The 650B wheel is going to be smaller and lighter, so slightly stronger. You have less rubber in terms of tire and less material in terms of wheel. So overall, quicker, I would say. Let's see. All right. Nice. Thank you, Nick. What are my thoughts on the Thesis OB1? I got a chance to throw a leg over that. It was a fun bike, very reminiscent of the Salsa War Road. So if you like the War Road and are looking for an alternative, I know the Thesis bikes are great bang for buck. You can get a second wheel set and stuff. Then that would be, I think, a comparable lateral choice. How much is too much of a different in width for tire? 50 front paired with a 43 rear. Okay. So I'm not too big of a fan of mullet tire setups, just because, especially if you run a bigger tire in the front, it does change the geometry a little bit. I don't have too much personal experience, but to me it just makes sense to run similar width tires. Brandon, is the full touring bike dead now that camping gear is smaller and lighter? I don't think so. I think people will always have preferences. Some people will always want to do the 4-pannier expedition touring setup. Some people will always want to do the more lightweight bike packing setup. I think there are limits to a lighter weight setup, especially if you're going very long and distant places with little resupply. You're going to have to run racks at some point, unless you're just ride all day and night and don't eat or drink. So best 700 by 50 millimeter tire. The best one I've tried is the Soma Cazadero in 700 by 50. That's what I used for Dirty Kansas all throughout training and the event itself. I felt that it had, good compliance. It was a big kind of supple tire, but it also rolled pretty quickly. It had a nice raised center ridge. Yeah, so if you're on hard pack or pavement, pretty quick tire. Let's see. Tyler Hinton, when was the last time you rode a road bike and how was it for you? So we used to own some plastic road bikes in the form of a Specialized Roubaix. I think the max tire clearance was 30, and they were fun. There's no denying that road bikes are fun bikes to ride on the road. I remember when Pan Racer first came out with their Gravel Kings. They came out in like 700 by 28. That was their gravel tire, and I put those on the Roubaix. And at the time we were living in Portland, so I would ride it through Forest Park, and it did it, but it was not enjoyable like on really rocky stuff. And yeah, I mean, since then we just kind of look for more unpaved roads just because there's less traffic. So. Aaron asked, did I ever take watercolor classes? No, I self-taught watercolor and use primarily YouTube. So there's a couple of great watercolor channels out there. There's one guy named Gary Tucker. I think he teaches watercolor, and he's really good at explaining kind of the mental aspect of how to paint. There's Mind of Watercolor. That's great for kind of basic techniques and how to handle a brush. But between those two channels, I've learned a ton. Nick, yeah, the jump up from 700 by 50 to 41 is pretty significant. Thanks. Does toe overlap matter when picking a bike? It matters less the larger the bike gets. If you're a short rider, it matters a ton, especially if you run wide tires and especially if you put fenders on those tires. I've had some bikes where very slow speed turning, my toe would run into the fender and everything, which was no fun while commuting. So I think if you ride bikes that are, let's say, 56 and above, then probably not an issue. If you don't run fenders, generally not an issue. But if you ride bikes 54 and smaller, more of an issue. Let's see. So, update on the Box Prime 9. So from what I've heard from like other reviewers is that it's a stiff rear derailleur. So I'm not like the lone wolf in saying that box 9 stuff is stiff. It was to the point where it was kind of painful to shift, actually. So currently not on the bike. What else? So I'm going to try something really quick, and we'll see if this works. I'm going to jump over to Bike Insights, and bam. So tell me if you guys see Bike Insights on the screen, and we'll do some bike nerdery here. So someone shout out a bike that they want me to virtually review. TB, what do you think of the Thesis carbon wheels? I got to the ones I got to ride were fine. I didn't ride them long enough to make any like strong opinion. But yeah, I think they're pretty good value. Okay, come on guys, give me a like to type in here. Any takers? Come on. I don't think the Cinelli is going to be in here, but I will search. Cinelli Tito? Oh, well, let's say I'm wrong. Guess it's here. Okay. So I've punched in the Cinelli as per request. We'll see what Bike Insights comes up with. And yeah, so here's the Cinelli to the Plus. Not sure what class of bike it is, but let's deconstruct it. So going down the list, stack and reach. These are typically what the numbers that we'd look at for fitment. Cruising down here, I see the C-tube angle is at 75, so that's a relatively steep C-tube angle, bringing you a little bit closer on top of the cranks. What else? In terms of chainstay length, 395, that seems really short. What wheel size is this? And the trail is 53. Wow. So really long in the rear, or really short in the rear, and also fairly nimble in the front. Strange bike. Okay, I've never seen chainstays that short. It looks like it's super tucked. I don't know if that's correct or not. But okay, so another bike. Salsa Wood Smoke, Bootleg Hobo, King Grail, Fargo Tie. Let's see. Sonder Camino Tie. Let's see if I can find that one here. Yeah, the only bummer part about Bike Insights is not every bike is in here. So let's look at their small, because I imagine that's the frame size I would ride. So I'm curious for me. All right, 650B option in the small. So chainstay length is 435. So that's in the all-rounder kind of category for me. Almost approaching touring bike, but not quite touring bike length in the rear, but getting there. The trail is 64. So this is actually pretty close to kind of an endurance road bike, at least in terms of the front end handling. What else can we discern from here? C-tube angle, 74.5, so a little bit more on top of the bottom bracket, if you will. I tend to actually like bikes that have a little bit steeper C-tube angle. I think when the road gets steep, it just positions you in a better position to climb rather than being way behind the bottom bracket. Yeah, so it looks like a fun bike. My personal preference would be for a bike That's probably a little bit shorter, so at least 430, if not like the 425 range. This tells me that it's kind of a all-rounder, slightly longer wheelbase, good for descending-ish, I think. So, what else? Elephant NFE. That is a good bike to look up. Let's see if it's in here. If I can spell NFE. What do we got? Come on, internet. So, I think that's been a pretty good test of the software. Come on, is it finding it? Elephant. Aha. So I believe Elephant they're based in Seattle, right? Or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. And let's see what we got here. I believe this is a low trail bike. Yeah, so trail 31. If you're of the Jan Heine school of thought, then this is the bike for you. Chainstay 435, so all-rounder-ish, low trail in the front. Could be a fun bike. What I've found, now this is like personal preference here, but for me, I actually prefer bikes with a higher trail for gravel, especially when you're descending and it's rocky, because it makes for more stable descender. I mean, if you look at mountain bikes, that's why they're all, their trail numbers are 70 to 100. There are no low trail mountain bikes, and that's for a reason. So in some ways, this bike is a little bit quirky in that, because it takes kind of the Bicycle Quarterly school of thought for the front end and applies it to kind of off-road gravel riding. So yeah, Spokane, that's where they're based out of. So cool. Well, let me switch it back to this scene. Sweet. That was kind of cool. I was able to do some screen sharing and chatting with you guys and bringing up your comments like so. So, nice. So let's see. Soma Fog Cutter. That's an interesting bike. Let's see what it says on Bike Insights. So one of the reasons I'm doing this test is to see if my laptop can actually run all this software at once. Because it works fine when I'm not streaming, but once you start punching it out through the internet, all things go wrong. All sorts of things can go wrong. So, did it find it? Soma Fog Cutter. My guess is I would be a 54. So Carlos asks, what do I think of mammals? I have nothing against Lycra, to each their own. I, don't dress like that to ride bikes, but I certainly don't begrudge anyone that wants to, dress like that. We're all adults here. My only issue is when, people just tell you that there's only one way to ride and you have to wear very specific clothing. That's when I push back. Okay, Fog Cutter. What do we got? Seep tube angle 74, so a little bit on the steeper-ish side. Chainstay 424, so that tells me that it's pretty sharp in the rear end, so probably quick to accelerate. In terms of the trail, 63. So 60 like 55 to about 65 is where most road bikes land. So this tells me that it's aiming towards some kind of road bike-ish geometry. Yeah, so that is the fog cutter. Beyond that, stack and reach tells us about its fit. Yeah, cool. Let me go back here. All right, we got West Texas in the house. C. Johnson, where in West Texas? Fun fact, that was one of our favorite places to ride when we were on our big tour. I really enjoyed Marfa. Went down to Big Bend, camped at Chisos Basin, which is a heck of a climb to get into. Enjoyed a couple of evenings at Terlingua Ghost Town, and hung out on the porch, listened to music. That's pretty rad. So fog cutter is an endurance road bike. Thank you, Alex. That's what the geometry would suggest. Candale Slate, not my favorite. Yeah, there's probably a reason why it got discontinued, guys. Aside from being ugly. Sorry. If you have a Slate, I'm sure it's a lovely bike. Just hurts my eyes. Hurts my eyes when I see it. Scott, I think that, I don't know. I think rims make a heck of a lot more difference depending on what rims you're upgrading from. Yeah, it's. I think weight makes a huge difference in the wheel system, and if you're going from, nice hubs, mediocre rims to lighter rims, that's gonna make more of a difference than nice hubs to nicer hubs and same weight rims. What else? Okay, so Aaron asks, I really enjoyed the fit and geometry of my first generation aluminum 9er RLT. Anything similar shaped would be more compliant. So let me show you something pretty cool here, which some of you may not be aware of. But let's see if I can do this. Search. You can, if there's a bike you like, and you're very specific on a certain measurement, you can actually search. You can use those measurements as a filter. So I'm not quite sure which measurements you like on the RLT, but I'll give you an example of something I typically do. So for example, I want a lively bike, so something at least an all-rounder, if not quicker. So what I'm going to put for the minimum is 425, and the max, I don't want the rear chains to be longer than 430, because in my opinion, after that it starts to lean towards more of a touring bike. And let's say in terms of trail, I want it to handle a little bit more stable than an endurance road bike. So I'm going to put the minimum trail to 65, and let's say the maximum trail to 75. Because I think after 75, once the trail gets into the 80, it gets a little drunken goaty. Okay. So these are the two sets of filters I'm going to use to find other bikes that have similar kind of parameters here. So let's see what it comes up with. So you can totally do this at home too, on Bike Insights. We'll nerd out with the creators of Bike Insights in a couple days. And yeah, just taking its time. I don't know if it's taking a little bit longer than usual because of I'm pushing it through Ecamm Live as well. Okay, here we are. So given these parameters of having a shortish wheelbase and a little bit higher trail, higher than a endurance road bike for sure, but not quite mountain bike. These are the bikes that it suggests. So Surly Straggler, Surly Troll, Wolverine, Karate Monkey Crosscheck, all this stuff. Crest Bambora, of course. Those are kind of the numbers that, I borrowed my preferences from the Crest Bambora. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of that bike. Kona Road falls in under there. Yeah. So that's one way. If you know you like certain aspects of a bike and want to see what other bikes have similar traits, you can filter by all sorts of filters, actually. If, let's say, you like the a particular stack to particular reach, it gives you this this figure of the stack to reach ratio. You can search by stack to reach ratio, so you can find bikes that will fit you without ever having to test ride them. What else is there? If you like a particular seat tube angle, like you like it a little bit steeper because it puts you, more on top of the cranks, or if you like it a little bit slacker, you can search by a range of seat tube angles. Yeah. Typically, wheelbase is something to consider, but I don't think I would necessarily search by that because so many things will determine a wheelbase. So PG Torres asks, have I ever ridden an open gravel bike? I have not. I've been emailing them for the past 3 years and still no bike to test. So the joys of being a small channel, guys. Whew. All right. So I think the test was successful-ish. Yeah, Aaron, no problem. It was cool to kind of to show off how Bike Insights works. And again, if you want to learn more about Bike Insights, we're going to have a live stream with Dan and Zach on Sunday, May 3rd. It's going to be happy hour format, so lots of bike nerdery. And I think I'll answer one more question, and then I'll hop off because I've got to do some bike whispering in a couple of hours. I want to save my voice. If you're riding mainly unloaded, is it bad for a short rider to ride 700C? I would say so. So if you're under 5'4", you're riding a small bike, and with a 700C wheel for the geometry to work so you don't get toe overlap, they have to slacken the head tube angle. So imagine the head tube is like this on the rest of the size range. And then because you're a smaller rider, you have to do this to put the wheel further out in front so it does not hit your toe. In doing so, this completely alters how the front end of the bike handles. It tends to increase the trail, which could be good and a bad thing depending on what your expectations were for the bike. Increased trail means it's kind of more stable. Descending, if the trail is too high, at slow speed climbing, it tends to wander a bit. So I'll say, in particular, if you want kind of that crit road bike feel or endurance road bike feel, in 700C on a really small bike, it's going to suck because the trail is going to be way higher than that target 60 trail. That said, if you're not so much concerned with kind of a lively road handling feel in the front and don't mind something a little bit slacker, a little bit more gravel oriented, then it could work with 700C. But again, you'd have to look at the numbers because once a trail creeps into the upper 70s and the 80s, it handles really, really weird. So that's what I'm going to say about that. Sweet. Well, I think what I'm going to do now is try to figure out how to end the live stream. And I have no idea how to do that because this is the first time I'm using this software. All right. Mike Hayes from Albany, Oregon. Nice steelhead in your profile picture. You know, when I lived in Portland, uh, I fished for steelhead for 3 years, and in all that time, I only caught one. So, good on you. And I wish we had some steelheading in Montana. I guess I can't complain. I mean, we live like a block away from a trout creek, so that's not too bad. um, what else? Okay. Well, I think I'm gonna try to end it if I can find the stop button. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Finish. Okay. This my first time using the software, so so apologies. I think it worked pretty well. It's kind of cool to bring up comments like this, right? Adds a lot of interaction, um, and it's something that other software solutions I've used don't do well. So Zoom doesn't do it. StreamYard does it, but it sucks in terms of screen sharing. Ecamm Live works pretty well so far, but people have to, if you bring in a guest, they have to call in via Skype, so that might be kind of limiting. Um, so let's see. Okay, guys. This may or may not end the stream. I'm going to hit the finish button on the... Oh, it does. Okay. All right. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks for helping me test out this broadcast. We've got an awesome live stream tomorrow. We're going to be talking with Ultra Romance about Ultra Dynamico tires. So it's one you don't want to miss. You can ask them your questions, and we can learn about the how and why of developing that tire. And lots of good stuff on the channel coming up.